said, in the face of immense repression, Cameroons rallied en masse, demanding one thing. They wanted a conférence nationale, which was a face-to-face encounter between the party in power, which was, of course, the only legal one at the time, and opposition forces that were determined to bring multipartism to the country. And the president's now infamous response to this was that the conference was sans objet, pointless, useless, no reason to have it. Sans objet has become a joke expression in Cameroon. It's what you say today to laugh if what you really want to do is cry. And in conversations I've had about the upcoming election with friends and with acquaintances in and from Cameroon, I've been struck by the number of times that this expression has come up. Sans objet. This from people who are almost uniformly opposed to the ongoing rule of Mobia. The whole thing, I've been told over and over and over again, is a complete and utter waste of time. L'élection est sans objet. That's a direct quote. I can't count anymore the number of times I've heard it. Whether people come out to vote or not, the view is that the process is going to be rigged, and that even if it's not rigged, the opposition is so fractured that there's absolutely no reason to assume that Biya will not be elected, which is, of course, what Dominique said and argues quite well in the book. The whole thing is a farce. That's another quote. I've heard it 40, 50 times. The problem, of course, is that this particular farce isn't amusing. Fall of 2001 in Cameroon could turn out to be a very bloody time. In as violently policed a state as Cameroon, voting is a dangerous sport. Now consider something on the face of it really very simple, almost an anecdote. You walk into a polling station, and you're not handed a single form with the logos of all of the parties, all of your options listed. What you get is a sheaf of forms, and it's quite a sheaf of forms because there are over 20 parties that are involved. A multitude that may sound like democracy at work, but that is in fact the result of concerted action by the ruling party to dilute what little there might be of a real opposition bloc. So you vote with one ballot, and you're left with the rest of the stack. Now, presumably you're bright enough to stuff the unused ballots in a large pocket or a bag, but still, it's awfully easy for people who might want to know, informants, of whom there are many, to establish for whom it is that you voted. Now, as many voters in previous equally problematic elections will tell you, this can get really ugly really fast. Just how ugly it could get is going to be brought home on October 9th by the number of police and armed forces deployed in cities and around voting stations. And this is going to be a very specific reminder. It's going to be a reminder of a bloody week in late February of 2008 when over 100 young people, and that's probably a very low estimate, were killed and over 1,500 were jailed around an event intimately related to this upcoming October 9th election. To wit, the president's announcement that he would be amending the Constitution to allow himself to run for the presidency one more time, which was, of course, explicitly forbidden by this self-same Constitution. This reminder will in turn remind people of another bout of intense repression, the extrajudicial murder of over 1,000 men and women in the space of 1 month, 8 years earlier in Douala, at the hands of a battalion called the Operational Command. And of course, all of this will remind of the intense violence that both Fanny and Dixon alluded to in the early 1990s during the years alternately known as les années de braise or du Mont. These reminders of state violence are, to say the very least, pernicious. It's one thing to refuse to vote, to boycott what you consider to be a corrupt endeavor, as many activists are calling to do. It's another thing entirely to be so legitimately concerned with potential violence that you decide not to vote for the sake of safety, which is what a number of people I've been interviewing are suggesting is the best course of action. And then there's the matter of exhaustion. This is something that both of the previous speakers have underscored. State-sponsored repression, ethnic divide and conquer strategies, off-the-charts corruption, privatization of the state, what Jean-François Bayard has called the production of a rhizomatic state, disastrous unemployment, and so on, have been stunningly effective at breaking the back of what was in the early 90s one of the most vocal pro-democracy movements in Africa. Basic rights have been under attack for so long, with such staunch support from northern capitals, that an extraordinary sense of exhaustion has taken hold. A despair that hits hardest those who are most essential to effecting change. And that's, of course, the young, who constitute half the population. Now, this exhaustion is sought, it's encouraged by the powers that be, because nothing is more effective as a means of ensuring the status quo. This, again, is something that Fanny was arguing. This, combined with a near across-the-board sellout of opposition candidates to the ruling party, results in important numbers of young people simply failing to care about the election. They just don't give a damn. And this, of course, despite official claims to the contrary, is the best possible news for Paul Biya. Not because it's going to change anything in the election outcome, it's a foregone conclusion that his party is going to win, but because it might mean less noise when the party does win. Fewer young people in the streets avoiding a possible explosion, which would inevitably be drowned in blood. Now, not that the Biya regime would hesitate before bloodshed. We have ample proof of that, and it doesn't need to. Northern capitals and institutions make clucking sounds about transparent elections and human rights, but Cameroon is far too strategic a place for anybody to do anything serious about any of this. Biya has complete impunity in the face of his backers, and he knows this. As far as the backers are concerned, the object isn't the election isn't only sans objet, it's a non-object. But let's imagine, let's present this idea for just a minute that the election could be a functional object. Even if it were possible for a fair and transparent election to take place, and even if there were an entirely honest, independent candidate who could win that election, understand, of course, that I'm speaking in purely hypothetical terms here, even then what? The problems plaguing Cameroon reach so deep, they go so much further in breadth and in time than Biya's disastrous reign alone. And again, I'm echoing the two previous speakers, that we're looking at decades to make a dent. The opposition slogan is spot on. Biya must go. This is self-evident. But in the end, the election is just the very tip of the iceberg. And that iceberg, as Dixon has made quite clear, is what we need to be talking about.
Thank you, Dominique. Now, Patrice.